He cried for blood, he raved for blood, till a fearful change began, and he turned to rend the peaceful flocks and lost the shape of man. His shoulders bare were clothed with hair, his limbs grew long and lean, yet still you might trace on his wolfish face what once the wretch had been. The grisly locks were hard and stiff, the eye was cold and keen, and the savage sneer of Lycan's mouth in the famished wolf was seen. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Howling Halloween 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Howling Halloween. Let's dive right in with one of the most highly regarded werewolf films of all time, The Howling. I mean, I expect good things from this one.
Many minutes later.
Well, that was... wow. I mean, it was a really good flick, but... I mean, good lord, what kind of movie did I pick to start off Howling Halloween? Oh, it's this fun little annual thing to celebrate werewolf movies. It'll be such a fun way to celebrate Halloween on YouTube.
Holy shit. Fuck.
People are gonna think I'm some kind of a goddamn psychopath. Which isn't true, by the way. I'm much more of a sociopath anyway. The Howling came out in 1981 and was directed by Joe Dante, who's responsible for the second greatest Christmas movie of all time. Of course, after the obvious.
When in the streets surrounded by kids on new bikes pointing, "That's the girl that Santa hates!" She runs away, alcoholic by the age of 9, dead before she's even...
That actually is pretty funny.
This movie has a lot of great elements. For starters, the opening is very well done, with TV static cutting in and out with news reports of women being found murdered, which is a clever way to give exposition to the audience. Another solid element of this movie is the acting, with everybody doing a good job, but the standout is definitely Dee Wallace, who plays Karen White, the main protagonist of the film. The tone and the atmosphere of the film is also another thing to be admired, with it keeping a relatively somber tone throughout the story while providing a couple of moments of levity without the comedy detracting the more serious elements. And I'm not gonna make an MCU comparison, even though it would be really easy to. But I won't. All the forest scenes are also appropriately creepy, with the fog always being present even during the daytime when it's sunny, which really doesn't add up, but complaining about that lack of realism in a movie with werewolves just seems counterproductive. Which I feel like that's something CinemaSins would try to point out, or something stupid like that, but, just not really necessary. But fog in a horror movie is something that always adds to that creep factor. No matter how worn out or even cliche it might be, I'm still a sucker for it, since it at least adds some kind of atmosphere to a scene instead of just, oh, another dark, scary forest. The tone isn't limited just to the environment, but also to the colony as well, which is initially depicted as a group of mental health patients that were seeing the therapist Dr. George Wagner. And you can tell that something is off about the colony, and that's just slowly revealed throughout the film. Although, to be fair, I think most people can guess the twist at the end, which is still a fun reveal. Which, spoilers, but the twist is that everyone in the colony is actually a werewolf. Yeah, shocker. The weird cult-like collection of people is a secret werewolf cult. Who could have seen that one coming? There's also some fun references to the original 1941 Wolfman, which I have already reviewed and highly recommend that you go and check out. There goes that plug. So let's talk about the werewolves in this film. You know, the whole thing that caused me to start this tradition. For starters, the design of the werewolves are really horrifying and perfectly match the nature of the beast, with them just looking pure evil. Which is accurate since they are depicted as creatures of evil that can willingly transform and have been shown to enjoy inflicting pain and suffering on others. It's a bit outside of the norm of the usual out-of-control beast that can turn even the kindest of souls into a bloodthirsty monster. But I think this angle is one not often explored since these originally were depicted as creatures of evil, even just within real life human culture. They look mangy and wild with almost comically long bunny ears. Kind of reminds me of the Easter Bunny.
G'day, mate.
Nope, hold on. We'll get to a Hugh Jackman at the end of this month, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. I don't know, Bugs Bunny joke right here.
But what about the sparkler berries?
Somebody get that guy to a doctor.
The suits look very well done, with it all being done practically, with only a handful of shots being stop motion. Transition into the practical effects. The transformation scenes are also very well done, with the transformation being very disgusting and horrifying to watch. However... Now hold on. Hear me out. While it's good, when compared to the way that it's shot and edited to An American Werewolf in London, it noticeably has some issues that just can't be ignored. And it is fitting since Rick Baker, the legend that gave us the greatest transformation sequence of a werewolf ever, actually left this film to work on that one, leaving the special effects to be done by Rob Bottin. And my issues with the transformation has nothing to do with the practical effects, since they are top notch. However, the way the scene is paced and shot does evidently make it known what practical effects were used for certain shots, which will take some viewers slightly out of the moment during the transformation scene, which doesn't help when you want the audience to be just as terrified as the main characters. It also feels very drawn out for what is supposed to be a relatively quick transformation. Certain shots are held on too long, which makes sense since they are impressive and you want to get your money's worth. But at the cost of making the context questionable, with Eddie the werewolf in question transforming in front of Karen. But since the scene feels much slower paced, it makes you wonder, why doesn't she just leave? It makes it seem like she has plenty of time to escape. Also, the whole reason why Eddie is transforming is to terrify her, which I guess could be an explanation for why she's not moving, since to be fair, that would probably be something that would cause most people to freeze up. But even then, once he's a fully transformed werewolf, she acts and throws acid on him and then runs out. So it makes you wonder, why didn't she do that before either? Compare this to the prolonged transformation of An American Werewolf in London, where the slower pacing of it is meant to show how horrifying and painful it would be to be forced into this. Each scene is trying to accomplish a different goal, but I believe that the slower tone fits one better than the other. If you want a more in-depth comparison between the two, I highly recommend you check out Collative Learning's video. Hope I said that right. If you're checking this out, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, which I'll include in the link in the description. I think the fact that American Werewolf in London does try to show the wolf as little as possible also really adds more in the long run, but regardless, both are excellent examples of state-of-the-art practical effects in movies, and really shows just how impactful they can be, especially compared to the overuse of CGI. The ending does have a fine climax involving an escape from the colony of the werewolves and basically turning it into a horror shooting game. Which, come on, who doesn't love that? In addition to being depicted as creatures of evil, another aspect that I find fascinating about the werewolves is how they are so heavily linked to sex, or for the purpose of YouTube, so that it will not strike this channel with the force of 1,000 suns, I'm going to be bleeping it out because, well, we all know, let's go with how sensitive the YouTube algorithm can be. Bunch of pansies. An aspect of werewolves has been how it's the idea of people giving in to their primal animalistic behavior that's inside all of us. I have briefly mentioned this idea in my review of the 1941 Wolfman film, as well as even in my review of Primal Season 2. Lycanthropy as a metaphor for sexual drive and craving go hand in hand with the idea that this thing inside of everyone has the capability to turn even the nicest of people into horrible monsters. The Howling even goes so far to show that some people choose to fully embrace this darker side, which unfortunately reflects in the real world. We see this with Bill after he's attacked by a werewolf. First, he is seen eating meat, which up until this point is something that he comments on how he actively tries to avoid eating it. Later, he leaves Karen in the middle of the night to go commit marital infidelity with everybody's dream goth mommy, who's been lusting after him more than me with a muscle mommy, where they both turn into werewolves. So basically just furry porn. Gosh, if I had a nickel every time I mentioned furry porn on this channel, I'd have 2 nickels. Which, I mean, it's not a lot, but it's still weird that it's happened twice. The debate of human nature and how much our society has shaped how we view our more animalistic instincts is one that I have always enjoyed, because whether people want to admit it or not, everyone has a little bit of that primalness inside of them. It's just most people are able to suppress it because they're decent human beings. Random side note, but just think about how we share 98% of DNA with chimpanzees and just how insane chimps are. With the many similarities that we have with one another on a behavioral standpoint, and it really comes together and you see, oh yeah, we're not too far off from them. Don't believe me that we don't have this inside every one of us? Just think of how many violent crimes occur daily, with many just being that can be only described as animalistic in nature, as well as going the same for the brutality of some of these violent attacks.
He was allegedly stabbed to death in Malibu by his estranged wife, who now faces charges. Eyewitness News reporter Amy Powell joins us live for the news here with more on this tragic story. Amy?
Pictures. New video from Oakland shows a woman being dragged and robbed of her bag in broad daylight.
Chicago police are looking for two men caught on camera violently attacking a person in Bucktown.
Calls for change when it comes to the violence in Chicago. Gun violence, of course, taking the lives of innocent people everywhere.
One man is in custody tonight as law enforcement investigates the death of a child. 25-year-old Michael Cherry is in the Shawnee County Jail being held for rape and first-degree murder in the death of 5-year-old Zoe.
This morning, 160 people are facing charges in Ohio accused of human trafficking. It's the latest in a series of law enforcement stings across the country. One just last week in Florida saw more than 200 arrests.
But speaking of violent crimes and werewolves, I think that the aspect that I was most surprised by was how much of an allegory Karen's first experience with Eddie is for being assaulted. With their first meeting taking place in an adult film theater, and the film on the screen is that of a woman being tied and assaulted, and Eddie forces Karen to watch before beginning the transformation. And while not explicitly shown, I don't think it's too far-fetched to assume that he would have tried to have his way with her as well, since when they do meet, he says things like, "You're not like the others, you're special," and stuff like that. And stuff like that really makes the scene even more uncomfortable than a normal horror movie would. It's just enough realism to give you the icks. Kind of reminds me of Split when you see the flashbacks with the uncle. It's just uncomfortably real. Even after Eddie is killed by a police officer, there are several different reactions to Karen's incident, including the boss, who could represent people that never believe or severely underplay what the victim has gone through in assault cases. Throughout the film, Karen experiences trauma episodes and nightmares thinking about what happened. Again, it's mostly depicted as the werewolf aspect, but I still wouldn't rule out the possibility of assault taking place, or at the bare minimum being attempted. I mean, Eddie clearly has no problem murdering people, so I don't think he'd be stopping and taking a moment and saying, you know, I'm okay with murdering these women, but rape? Well, even I'm not that evil.
Listen. You know, I dislike sexual assault as much as the next guy. That's some bad stuff. Boo! Don't like it. But
after Karen does initially escape Eddie and is back at home, we see how Bill still does his best to try and comfort her and still respects all her wishes, which, hey, we love to see it. But it's still something that takes its toll on her, and sadly this all leads to a series of events that leads to her life being taken away, as she tries to warn the world of the colony by turning into a werewolf herself. Which, while an impactful scene, slightly mitigated because her form just looks like a giant Yorkie mixed with Chewbacca, so it's not really scary at all. I think it would have much more of an impact if she did look just as evil looking as all the other werewolves that we saw in the film. Granted, it did look like she was also in the in-between stages of transforming, but even still, I think if we saw her fully transform all the way, I think that would have had a bigger impact still. And in the end, the evil, hot goth mommy does escape, meaning that the werewolves are still out there, meaning that the cycle will continue on. Which I still feel like it fits the metaphor for assault and sexual violence in our society, where there's always going to be people that get away with this kind of stuff, no matter how much evidence will be stacked on them. Again, I might be looking too much into this movie, considering a lot of reviews talk about how funny this film is, which it certainly has its moments, but I wouldn't call it that, not like an American Werewolf in London, which is very clearly a comedy. Granted, at the time it came out, that's probably what it was more like, but with the current culture, it feels like this movie has aged remarkably well as social commentary on the culture of assault and sexual violence. I mean, it's not like this film's going to win any Oscars for thought-provoking, but it does feel like it handles it mostly respectfully and tastefully. It doesn't feel like it's a TV portrayal, I should say. Unlike something like 13 Reasons Why, which definitely does not fully understand just how serious or what all that actually entails. But then again, what do I know? I'm just a moron who makes silly little videos online. Well, everyone, thank you for watching, and I promise that the next movie won't be as depressing as this one, so stay tuned next week. Have a wonderful day, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.